When the N64 was announced, we already reached a point in gaming where Super Mario was the undisputed champ. It seemed that there was nothing else that the Italian plumber could conquer. With games like Super Mario 3 and Super Mario World under Nintendo's catalog, the Super Mario series was already considered a juggernaut, and it seemed as if there was no way those games could be topped. Nintendo, the innovative company that they are, decided to create a completely new genre, and thus, the 3D platformer was born. Super Mario 64 introduced the third dimension to the gaming industry, which was not only groundbreaking for its time, but even for today. You can thank Super Mario 64 for any modern games you're enjoying, beyond just the 3D platformer. This wasn't easy to do. There were plenty of challenges that Nintendo needed to face when introducing this genre to its fans. Something Nintendo has historically done well is teaching the player the controls without spoon-feeding information. Latiku, the guy on the cloud who follows you around with his camera, and Toad, well, you know who Toad is. They help you along the way with some tips and controls, but ultimately, you're on your own. My first experience was just jumping around and figuring out the controls outside the castle. For its time, this felt incredibly realistic in a 3D world, and there was no music, just the sound of water, the birds chirping. It was perfect. Mario 64 was a true introduction to the new dimension of gaming. It was the future. Once I worked my way into the castle, I figured out that there are only certain rooms I could go into, since I didn't have any stars. Once I figured out that I could jump into paintings, my adventure truly began. The first level of Bomb Battlefield teaches the gamer both linear progression as well as alternate routes they can take. Since all of the routes lead to the top of the mountain where the boss is, you really can't get lost. The first level also teaches the gamer the essential mechanics of fighting Bowser later on, but through King Bomb. You all know how this goes, just head for the back door. Mario's always been a backdoor guy. The first level also doesn't have any cliffs where you can fall off, which is important for new players who aren't very good because it won't make them frustrated and want to stop playing immediately. I don't care how bad you are at video games, anyone can beat the first level of Super Mario 64, which is important to keep younger gamers engaged. Although the predecessors to Super Mario 64 had great tutorials in their levels, and you can look up on YouTube plenty of videos explaining that, it's still much easier to die in those levels than Super Mario 64. Many people say that Mario controls perfectly in this game. Most levels cater to how Mario controls, with its open space and fun challenging platforming sections, but there are certain instances where the camera is either not cooperating or the platforms require such precise control that it doesn't even match the way that Mario is executed. This is coming from a guy who has 20 plus years of analog controls under his belt. Just imagine what it was like back in '96 when players were first introduced to this kind of control scheme. Mario did not control perfectly only because there were certain levels that didn't cater to his movements, but let's go back to the good stuff because this game is one of the greatest games of all time. A great part, and probably my favorite part about Super Mario 64 was the level progression. I don't know if other games were doing it at this time, but if you weren't able to beat a level, you didn't have to beat it in order to beat the game. As most of you know, at the end of every level you get a star, and you need a certain amount of stars in order to progress and unlock more levels. This sounds really simple today, but this was groundbreaking for its time, and it allowed plenty of gamers to skip certain levels that felt quote-unquote cheap due to the crappy camera, or maybe just the fact that you suck. There are 15 stages in this game, and each stage contains 6 stars. There's also an extra star in each stage if you collect 100 coins. In addition to that, there are 15 other stars scattered throughout the castle, so there's a puzzle solving element that you have to kind of just explore and figure it out from there. The difficulty curve adapts as you progress from stage to stage. Nintendo did a fantastic job at making sure that each world gets progressively more challenging between its enemies, puzzles, and especially platforming. I grew up with the N64 as my first console. I was lucky enough to have older brothers who had all the systems before that, like the Super Nintendo and the NES and the Sega Genesis, but as far as I'm concerned, the N64 was my console. Some of my first memories were engraved through Super Mario 64, so naturally, I've collected all 120 stars. Back in the good old days before everyone was using the internet, I remember bragging to my friends about how I met Yoshi on the top of the castle and he gave me 100 lives. My stupid friends called me out on how I was lying, but it only took one playdate to prove those haters wrong. That's what makes the internet both a blessing and a curse, because we have access to every bit of information now, but it almost diminishes the magic that once was. I was able to experience meeting Yoshi at the top of the castle not because I read about it online, but because I searched every nook and cranny of the game and I was rewarded. Super Mario 64 reminds me why I play video games in the first place. It's a getaway. It takes me to another world that I haven't experienced before, enabling me to face conflict head-on even when circumstances seem unbeatable. The feeling when you throw Bowser into that final exploding spike is the feeling that I cannot even provide words for. After everything you go through, everything you learned, for that final blow against Bowser, it just makes it feel like it was all worth it, and it's the most rewarding feeling that you can really get out of any kind of gaming experience. Super Mario 64 to this day is a masterpiece. As always, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and let me know in the comments your favorite experience in Super Mario 64.
So long, Bowser! Here we go!